that is very grateful, and it is a blessing to have a breath, to eat, to enjoy food, and to sleep well. Let us be thankful to those whoever you might call and whatever gods you might worship. Welcome, Professor Franz Wissens, to Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University. I had a conference 3 or 2 years ago in Ambon, in the Protestant University. I thought that you were there, or did I make a mistake?
Was that with the Netherlands-Indonesia Consortium for Muslim-Christian Relations?
Yes, absolutely.
I was there, and we had a meeting at UI and Jogja as well.
Yes, of course. So we met twice. Sure. This is our second meeting, and at the time we met physically, not via virtual Zoom like at the moment. Thank you. So we have something a lot in common, not only historically, India, East Indies or Indonesia and the Netherlands was connected well, and you know, give us a legacy, administration, and unity across this archipelago. It used to be kingdoms, several kingdoms disconnected with each other and fought with each other. And historically speaking, you, under your administration, we become one, and then we inherited that kind of good administration from Batavia or Jakarta. This, our nation always forget to mention that the Netherlands had a great contribution in uniting Indonesia. And I wish this speaking in English, because if I speak this in Indonesia would be dangerous. Then everybody will accuse me of not patriotic or nationalistic enough. But in reality, the Netherlands contributed this nationality and patriotic, because the founding fathers of Indonesia from Soekarno Hatta educated well in the Netherlands way. And as according to many writers, mostly doctors, nurses, and medical school students contributed in nursing Indonesian nationality. And according to Benedict Anderson, due to this intelligentsia, due to the role of newspaper, due to the role of publication, we raise the awareness of Indonesian nationalism. Of course, this is because we did speak Dutch and French and English during the time in 1945 and before that. Anyway, thank you, Ibu Dekan, the Dean of the Faculty of Usuluddin, Ibu Inaya Rahmaniah, for holding such an important meeting, connecting us again. And I saw Vice Dean 1, Pak Zuhri, and I also saw in the picture Vice Dean 2, Pak Robi Abror. Thank you for attending this meeting. And of course, Vice Dean 3, Pak Yai Sofiullah, who already attended this meeting, perhaps the earliest. And thank you, Fadil, for moderating and leading this meeting. And Ibu Afni, thank you for your role in introducing and giving kind of nice chit chats this morning. And for everybody who involved in this conference, in this virtual meeting, thank you very much for making this to happen. Without all of your helps and participation, it's impossible to have such a honor meeting. Professor Franz Wissens, Sunan Kalijaga State Islamic University and Netherlands universities. I said universities because we have strong connection not only some of our lecturers, truly graduates from Leiden, from Amsterdam, from many Netherlands universities, not only because some of our lecturers has visited the Netherlands, witnessed good canals, good rivers, very nice old buildings that really inspiring, nice sceneries, tulips during the springs. We did enjoy that, but also historically, Sunan Kalijaga is closely connected to some scholars, you know. Martin van Bronissen often visited us. I wish Pak Frans knows him personally. He did some researches with our lecturers and he educated us. He trained us to become a good scholars due to the hand of Pak Martin, due to his sincerity, due to his generosity. And long time ago, who's the name? I forgot. Become a guest lecturers for a while.
Steenbrink.
Steenbrink, absolutely, yes.
Karel,
Indeed,
yeah.
indeed, Karel Steenbrink. He was not only a guest; he was part of us. He was part of us. And I think he visited us during his birthday, and we give presents together. He read a poem, a beautiful poem connecting our hearts. So, you know, we not only mind, but our hearts connected to each other. And, you know, Netherlands and Sunan Kalijaga is one, and we share some responsibility how to path our intellectual exercise to awareness to many issues. Pak Franz Wisens and all those who attend in this meeting, I would like to remind ourselves that Sunan Kalijaga Islamic University, Win Sunan Kalijaga, is deeply connected, deeply committed to the issues of plurality, to the issues of diversity. Because in our history, we welcome almost everybody, regardless of ethnicity, where they live, from which island, which religion they confess, how did they pray. We disregard all of these factors. We just welcome everybody to join, to become our students, to become our lecturers. Last year, I officially installed 2 lecturers embracing the faith of HKBP, Protestant Church of Medan. And also I install one of our lecturers in science and technology from the background of Hinduism of Bali. And during the celebration of Idul Fitri this year, we celebrate Idul Fitri after the fasting month of Ramadan, when we invite many religious leaders from different religious traditions, Hindu, Buddha, Katolik, Protestan, and in Indonesia is known as aliran kepercayaan, that is faith and belief outside 6 official religions, and all give lectures. All said something in short because we should divide times. And everybody is happy because due to the role of our forefathers from Pak Muktiali, Pak Prof. Mahasin, who is still with us, Prof. Amin Abdullah still with us, they nurture us to become religiously plural, religiously diverse, respecting diversity. However, I should be very perfectly honest with you that the issues of environment is not enough, not sufficient to be raised here. I came to Ambon 3 years ago with Pak Franz Wiesen too, and other speakers who talk about, you know, raising the awareness that the world need our efforts, need our endeavor, how to fix this already deteriorating environment. You know, as raised by newspapers, by scholarly articles by many government, not all government though, some politicians deny the issue of environment, like the former president of the United States. I think we cannot deny that our environment deteriorating. Global warming, deforestation, the decreasing number of trees, the rise of sea level across the world, and the worsened environment that we live in. At the moment, there are many diseases, and including, I think, this virus corona. I believe that this virus coming from Wuhan, from China, but I read some not scholarly though, some newspaper citing some scientists informing us that this virus is leaked from laboratory. That is very unfortunate. We do not treat our laboratory nicely, and perhaps we are not all the time diligent. We negligent, perhaps also we ignore some procedures. Whatever happens, we are not enough in Indonesia talk about these issues. And Pak Franz Wissen's notice, I guess, and aware, and all of us aware that Indonesians are very religious, whether it's negative or positive perspective. We are very religious. If we talk everything, politics, money, talk the world, talk to scholarly, we cannot neglect religions. We should attach all of these to religious issues. Otherwise, nobody understand us. We should put Islam, we should put zikir, we should put Allah, we should put Holy Scripture, we should put saying of the Prophet in almost everything we say. Otherwise, nobody accept us. That is important thing we should note. This is a fact. This is a reality. So if we want to talk about environment, do not forget to talk about legitimacy. How we form a good theological perspective and put it in rather something that people can believe, not something that people can ignore. So in this way, we have a lot of interest to raise the issues of environment, that our environment is deteriorating. And our environment needs us to fix this. And to be very honest, in Indonesia, we still hold the belief that human being is still the master of the world. We still control the world. In Islamic term, we call us as Khalifa, or the leader of all living being. We are entrusted by God to manage this world and to do whatever we want, to exploit this world and to do whatever interest we concern. That is one of the weaknesses of Semitic belief. And I think we inherited this from Judaism, and please forgive me, from Christianity as well. Call it anthropocentric. I think we should switch, according to many critics and commentators, we should switch to Chinese or Indian worldview, that human being is not the center of universe. Human being is not the leader of the universe. Human being is only part of the sky. We are nothing more, nothing less than tree. We are nothing more, nothing less, just animal. Human being is animal according to Muslims, alim or Muslim scholar Ibn Khaldun. He called us hayawanun natek, mean Homo sapien in Latin term. So we are animal. So because we animal, we should respect nature. We are part of the nature. We are no more noble, no more precious. And we should respect the sky. We should respect this river. We should respect this tree. And we should put that in a dogma so people can believe it, not in a philosophical formulation. People will reject us. And I think Vice Dean 3 has a strong legitimacy to put that in tahlilan or in dua, that we are nothing more than what Ibn Khaldun described. We are hayawan, we are animal, we are not special, we are not unique, we are similar to cows that we will slaughter later for the kurban sacrifice. We are no more noble than that. But luckily, we have a good mentality in collaborating with others. According to many anthropological and sociological research, why we are excellent in surviving and dominating the world? Not because of our brain, because of our heart, because of our mentality in collaborating, not in annihilating. So from now on, we should collaborate, particularly with the Netherlands. We should collaborate with everybody. We should welcome all cooperation. We should welcome all contribution. In this way, we will survive. I do believe Sunan Kalijaga is full of the history of collaboration. Seek knowledge even as far as to China. Seek knowledge even as far as to China. We should seek knowledge. You know, Netherlands is even further than China because Netherlands is Europe. America already a continent. It is far enough. Some of our lecturers now at the moment residing in the United States to further their study, to pursue PhD program or something like that. Okay, we should broaden our mind and welcome all contribution, and then we should celebrate this. And in practice, perhaps we should write together. We should have a workshops that is in practice, pragmatically speaking. We should have workshop between Pak Fransison and Ibu Dekan Inayah to hold a conference and to write a good book, perhaps, or good article, so that this our talk become reality, not only discussion and mind exercise. We should welcome that, and we welcome any other ideas that perhaps could contribute better collaboration. I believe we are learning. We are learning to better collaborate. We are learning to better to listen each other. We are learning to better understand each other. There are many issues that Indonesia is not aware of, including us, particularly the issues of environment. Thank you very much for your patience, and I wish this meeting is only just the beginning. We expect more meetings, we expect more fruitful discussion, we expect more endeavor, we expect more efforts, including workshops, including seminar, including joint research and joint publication. And Sunan Kalijaga at the moment open our arm as wide as possible to anybody to contribute. Pak Franz, I just want to mention during my administration, helped by Dean, Vice Rector, we achieved a lot. We achieved a lot. Just last week, we become a champion of students' invitation of talents in sport and art. We got 14 gold medals, 14 gold. After gold, what is that? I forget in English.
Silver.
Silver. 14 silver, and the third is I forget what is that. And we champion. And before that, we had a lot of blessing. We should be very thankful. Like accreditation, national accreditation, we got A, and we got an excellent. And we had many awards in terms of managing money, in terms of achievement in the academic fields, achievement in students' affairs, and many things. And I hope many will come due to our heart, due to our sincerity, due to our clean effort. And again, thank you very much. I wish all of us luck and be blessed by nature and God. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to Rector Win Sunan Kalijaga, Professor Dr. Phil Al-Makin, SAG, MAG, for a very warm welcome. And not only did he welcome us into the session, he also remind us about our relationship with the Netherlands, not only the nation, but also university and the lecturers. And he expect to build another opportunities of cooperation with the Netherlands. And also he nicely situates the environmental issues in Indonesia with the religious worldview of our society. So he already set up us with a very good starting point into the discussion. Next, I will sincerely call the Dean of Faculty of Solidarity and Islamic Thought, Dr. Inayah Rohmania, SAG, MAG, for the second welcoming speech before we go into the session. Please, Bu Inayah.
Thank you very much, Mas Fadli, everyone. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, Honorable Rector, Professor Al-Makin, Prof. Franz, he is also part of this faculty, Pak, because he's also actually, his home base is here in this faculty. So we are so happy to have him. And actually what he's speaking about is, illustrating, our concern in this faculty, actually. And also Honorable Pak Franz Witsens, who are willingly coming here to join us. And thank you very much also for Pak Din Wahid. I think he's here. He's actually education atas Indonesian educational atas in Netherlands. And once he called him, Pak Rector, about Pak Franz coming in Indonesia, and we met actually in person with Mas Din Wahid, telling us that if we are welcoming, then we will have a collaboration. And he told me that someday Pak Franz will come here, and here actually you're here, and we are so happy because of this happening. And for everyone, the deans from faculty, Pak Franz, Pak Rector, Alhamdulillah, thanks God that some of our colleagues in this university, the Dean of Islamic Education is also joining here, the Dean of Islamic Community and Missionaries. I don't know how we translate dakwah, Fakultas dakwah in English, Pak Rector.
Mission.
The deans, yeah.
Mission.
I don't know.
Community development.
Yeah, the Dean is also here. Maybe you can just raise your hand, Ibu Emma Marhumah. So she is actually the Dean, and Ibu Sri Sumarni, she is the Dean for the Faculty of Islamic Education. And I think the Dean of the Science and Technology also coming, I think, and some of other deans from Islamic literacy, and then Islamic. Who else? I think we have 8 faculties in these universities, Pak Franz. Thanks very much. Thank you very much for coming here, and also our colleagues, vice deans. 3 of them are here, and all the audience, the lecturers, students, alumni, and also our colleagues from other universities in Indonesia. Thanks for coming. We saw here 56 persons joining this event, and thank you. Let me just introduce our faculty a little bit to Pak Franz. Actually, Pak Rector already mentioned a lot about this university, but in particular about our faculty, our mission is actually to be excel and leading in integration and development of Islamic studies and modern sciences for civilization. So actually our paradigm here in this university and this faculty of Usuluddin and Islamic Thought, actually is integration and interconnection, Pak Franz. Maybe this is the first time you come here to this faculty. Yeah, I think as Pak Rector mentioned earlier, you met both there previously, I think. So, and you know, what does it mean by excel and leading is that we are eager to be the faculty that has the best reputation at the national level, and you know, and to be what you call that, like equal, like equally equivalent to international standardized study programs, hopefully. And this is actually the program that we intend to bring our faculty to go internationally. And we have 8 study programs here, Pa, and this is actually the oldest faculty in this university. And and all the study programs, the undergraduate study programs, 5 undergraduate study programs we have here already accredited an A by the National Accreditation Agency for Higher Education. We call that Badan Nasional BNPT. And our study programs was Islamic philosophy. This study program is also certified internationally. And we have Quranic study and Islamic exegesis study program. This study program also certified internationally. And we have Hadith study, religious studies, sociology of religion. And we have 3 magister or graduate study programs. Graduate study program of Islamic philosophy, of Quranic study and Islamic exegesis, and of religious studies. And we have so many professors, including Professor Al-Makin, actually one of our experts on Islamic philosophy here in this faculty. We have also Professor Amin Abdullah. I guess you know him because he and Pak Rector actually are international public figures, so you must know him if you are, because I know that you are also an expert on Indonesia, so I'm sure that you know them very. And also we have Professor Syafaatun Al-Mirzana, maybe you know her too. We have Professor Sekar Ayu Aryani, who are the expert on Islamic studies. We have Professor Siswanto Masruri and some other professors who concerns who have a concern on Islamic on religious studies. We have also professors on what you call it, on Quranic studies and Islamic exegesis. We have Professor Sahiron. Now he is the vice rector. And also we have Professor Mustaqim, we have Professor Muhammad, and we have some other professors in these faculties who have concerns on Islamic studies. And hopefully, this is not only the beginning, but this is part of our collaborative programs. And we have, like I told you earlier, that we will have like more serious and long-term collaboration, including something like summer school in the future, hopefully. And this is actually in line with our mission to have to have this kind of collaborative programs with other relevant universities. And of course your universities and your concerns really fix with our mission and vision in this faculty. And again, thank you very much for everyone who already joined here. And Pak Rector, this is actually our effort to improve lecturer capacity in international level. Hopefully, this is also help Pak Rector to achieve his goal, actually to bring the university to be excellent and to be leading in Islamic studies in international level. Thank you very much again, Pak Rector and Pak Franz, and also our friends here. Enjoy, and inshallah, this is this program will be followed by other relevant programs. Thank you very much, and I will give back the time to Mas Fadli as the moderator. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much to our Dean, Ibu Inayah Rohmaniyah, Dr. Inayah Rohmaniyah, SAG MHUM, for another welcoming speech. She welcoming us into our session, into the topic, and also introduce us about the the history and about the current situation, current state of our faculty of Usuluddin in Islamic thought. So we will be heading into the main session in this meeting, which is the public lecture, Environmental Challenges in Indonesia and Emerging Issue in Religious Studies. And our moderator is Mbak Nur Abni Hafsah, and our speaker will be Professor Franz Witzen. And I conclude this opening session. I apologize if any mistakes I've been doing during this session, and I will give the next opportunity to Mbak Afni Hafsah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Honorable Prof. Phil Al-Makin as Director of State Islamic University of Sunan Kalijaga, Yogyakarta, and also Dr. Inaya Romania as the Dean of Faculty of Usuluddin Islamic Thought, and the Honorable Mr. Franz Joseph Serpas Witzen. I'm sorry if I'm wrong in spelling your name, because Indonesian tongue is difficult to read in English. From Radboud University, Netherlands, who has pleasure to present his presentation to us today. Actually, we are happy to Mr. Witzen in already here to deliver his perspective under this theme, Environmental Challenges in Indonesia, an emerging issue in religious study. As Mr. Witzen chat me at the time that he wants to talk about religion and ecology, and this is a concern for many people, especially in Indonesia too, that I sometimes watch the Netflix about the environment and also the National Geography, that I realized that Indonesia and the world is not really healthy enough today. So we have to do something for improving the healthy of the world that we live. When I access Mr. Witzen Google Scholars, I'm a little bit shocked that because Mr. Witzen is already write many articles, totally more 100 articles. What amazing that have been written in by him, so we can see how productive he is to write his perspective, especially in religion and ecology. And I read some articles about the water and the environment. What an amazing perspective that maybe we cannot we didn't ever thought about that. And as a secular and academics, we have to follow his path, especially his struggle in writing the articles that those as the contribution in both academic field and society. And ladies and gentlemen, this time for listening of Mr. Witzen presentation, but later, after Professor Witzen deliver his presentation, I will give the chance to audiences to ask question or perhaps delivering her perspective too under of the theme environmental challenges in Indonesia, an emerging issue in religious studies that Mr. Witzen will deliver today. So now the big chance, great time to Professor Witzen to deliver his presentation. The great time is yours.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Good morning, everybody. Selamat pagi. I'm very honored and pleasured to be here. Of course, I had hoped that we could meet offline. That was one of the reasons to come to Indonesia, to meet people face to face after being fed up with lockdown for more than a year, 1.5 years. So I came to Indonesia to do things offline. but unfortunately, due to Corona, that is impossible. And I completely understand the decision of the rector not to allow offline meetings like this, because it's too risky. Well, first of all, thank you, Professor Inaya Rohmania, Dean, for the invitation to share some of my thoughts with you. And also thank you for the kind words. Also, thank you to the rector, Professor Al-Makin, for his nice introduction. And in fact, while you were talking, Professor Makin, I thought, well, maybe I just skip my public lecture and we enter into a discussion because you referred already to many things that I'm going to talk about. And in fact, I think in the opening speech of Fadi Lukman, he made already a very interesting comment, namely saying, well, environmental issues, that is something that ecologists deal with, but we are not used to relate that to religion and theology. Well, in fact, that is the core of my concern. That we leave ecology and environment to the technicians and engineers, and we don't consider it from, or not that much from a religious point of view. And as the rector said already, I think from an Indonesian perspective, where people are very religious and frame religious issues in environmental issues in a religious frame, I think for us as scholars of religions and theologians and philosophers, there is a task ahead indeed to link the environmental concern with our theological perspectives and religious studies perspectives. And basically that's what I'm going to talk about. But just allow me, before I start my presentation, and as I said already, many topics that I'm going to address are introduced already by the rector. But just let me just some brief remarks on the introductory works as a kind of a discussion and sharing. Of course, I appreciate very much the link to the Dutch heritage, because that was one of the reasons to start the Netherlands-Indonesia Consortium for Muslim-Christian Relations, and the rector referred to our meeting in Ambon, but we also met in UIN Kalijaga in Jogja several times. And of course, UIN is very active in this consortium, so there is a link already. But maybe from a Dutch perspective, I'm a bit embarrassed if you say that you know, the present reality of Indonesia is partly also a product of the Dutch colonial heritage. Maybe a Dutch view would differ a bit, but that is a topic in itself. That would be a seminar in itself, how we look back at our common colonial history. I just want well, I'm not going to deal with that in extension, but I just want to repeat the words of our king, Willem-Alexander, 2 years ago, that for the first time in 75 years of history of independence of Indonesia, he apologized publicly for the Dutch colonial heritage. I think that was the first time in history that the king, on behalf of the Dutch population, apologizes for the Dutch colonial project in Indonesia. And so if Indonesians nowadays look back more positively at it, yeah, there are always two sides on history. And I think as scholars and as Netherlands and Dutch, the Netherlands and Indonesian universities, I think we have really to look back at it in a proper way and see both sides, the dark sides and the light sides of our colonial history. But that is not the topic that I'm going to talk about. Well, maybe it is a little bit the topic, because you referred to the visiting the Netherlands, of course. You see the academic institutions. You referred already to the collaboration that existed already. You refer to my prestigious predecessors, Martin van Brunesse, Karel Steenbrink, very well known in Indonesia, and I'm proud to stand in that tradition. But you referred also, and that was interesting, to the nice rivers and the clean rivers. And well, you know, Dutch are not good in everything, but we are good in one thing, and that is water management. And well, that is something that we can share, I think, with Indonesians. And in fact, that is one of the issues that I will talk about, the rivers and water in Indonesia, and how we as scholars of religion and possibly members of faith-based organizations could be more involved in water and river management. So thank you for that. Well, there was another interesting comment. These are just all kinds of preliminary remarks before I enter my presentation. You spoke about plurality as something that the UN Kalijaga focused on. And some of you who know me a bit better, they know that I was involved in conflict studies and extremism, studying radicalism in Indonesia for a long time. I supervised some PhD candidates on interreligious conflicts, Muslim-Christian relations, terrorism, and so on. And 10 years ago, I became a bit fed up with this whole debate. I don't deny that radicalism and extremism is also a challenge that we have to face. But some 10 years ago, I decided to make a shift in my focus and my career, because I thought, well, yes, sure, extremism and radicalism is a challenge, but I think we as humanity face a larger challenge, and namely that is our environmental challenge. And of course, we have to address the issue of radicalism and extremism. But I see an immense positive interfaith collaboration in addressing the ecological challenge as a common threat to the whole of humanity. Once again, without denying radicalism and extremism being threats to our nations. And of course, we have to face that. But I decided to also look at a more positive challenge. Well, not positive because of the topic itself, but I see quite some positive energy, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Hindu, indigenous believers, in addressing this, in my view, larger challenge that we have to face, namely our Earth. How do we human beings relate to our Earth? And I think the rector made a very interesting comment already, something that I will talk about later, and something that something that
Assalamualaikum, Pak Nur.
I will address later, namely our perception of human beings and man as the Al-Khalifa. And he referred to the Semitic traditions. Of course, that's something that Christians, Jews, and Muslims share. Our understanding of human being being the leader or the master, or even the steward of nature. And of course, possibly that is also one of the reasons of the exploitation of nature. And so we as scholars in theology, philosophy, religious studies really have to face also our image of man, the Al-Khalifa idea, which is very ambiguous in itself. I will address that later. And for me, I don't need to go to the Chinese worldview. Of course, I respect the Chinese worldview, but I think in our own traditions, and also in Islam, you have more mystical traditions where the human being is not positioned above nature, but as part of nature. So I think also, and I think there is a challenge here for a faculty of Ushuluddin and Islamic thought. The word Ushuluddin was new to me, honestly speaking. but I understand the foundations of Islamic thought. I think there is a real challenge for us to reconsider and to reflect on our standing of human being in relation to nature, to reconsider our understanding of Al-Khalifa or the stewardship idea, going back to our own traditions. And I think in Islam, but also in Christianity, there are many traditions where human beings don't position themselves above nature, but as part of nature, reconsidering also the mystical traditions in Christianity. So for myself, I don't need to go to Hinduism or Chinese worldview, or as some scholars nowadays do, go to the indigenous traditions, the primal religions. Of course, we can learn a lot from them, but I think we also can learn from our own tradition, going back to some of the sources that we forgot. We simply forgot in our reflection. Well, the rector referred to collaboration. I remind you that we had already a book together with Professor Makasin on religion, conflict, and cohesion in Indonesia some 10 years ago. It was a collaboration between my university and UIN Yogyakarta. So there is quite some collaboration going on already. And last but not least, and then I really stop my preliminary remarks and come to my topic. The rector referred to the many awards that we and Jogja got already in terms of academic scholarship, in terms of student assessment and research assessment. I challenge you to become also, to get also award in becoming a green campus or a clean campus. And well, one of the issues that maybe I will conclude is that I see that many, well, I visited quite some UINs, and some of them consider themselves to be a green campus or eco campus, like an eco pesantren. And what I see is that there is a lot of effort in the green technology, recycling water, fine, producing your own energy, fine. But, and then I go back to the first statement of Fadi Lukman. I don't see yet the link between the applied technology, which is fine, and the theology, the eco-theology. And well, I think these preliminary remarks, I say already quite some things that I'm going to say in my introduction, and maybe I'm going to repeat some things. But I work with people at ITB, I work with people at ETS, and they are doing many fine things, and most of them are Muslim. But when I ask them, and I think the Dean Inaya spoke about the interconnection or the interdisciplinary. Some of you who studied my publications, I did a project in Bandung on Citarum River. Well, I will talk about it later. And then when I asked the people at ITB, yeah, but you're doing fine things, water engineering, fine, the clean technology, fine, but how do you relate that to your religion? I mean, you are a Muslim. And they say, oh yeah, but I'm not an expert in that, you know, you have to go to the imam or you have to go to the kiai. I don't speak about religion. And I think that is one of the challenges for the UINs, as I see in Indonesia, to link the things that the technical universities do, ITBs and the ETS, and with the Islamic perspective, Islamic philosophy. Good. Well, that was a long introduction, and I think the introduction helped already to address some of the issues that I'm going to talk about. So just let me start. Well, I'm going to talk about environmental challenges in Indonesia as an emerging issue in religious studies. I said already, in my perspective, the ecological challenges are not yet so much related to religious studies and philosophy perspective, and Fadi Lukman referred to that already. There seems to be a split. I'm going to talk about that later. And well, in fact, religious studies came very late. If I look at the history of this debate, there was a study by Rachel Carson on the danger of pesticides, the Silent Spring, that was already in 1958. Then there were the beautiful studies of Sayyid Nasr, the Islamic philosopher, in the 1960s already, from an Islamic philosophy perspective, linking ecology and Islam, but not from a theological and religious studies perspective. This is quite late. And so one of my challenges is indeed, okay, it's very good what philosophers do and what biologists do and what engineers do, but let us also address this topic from an Islamic theology perspective. And there are many issues here. I'm not going to talk about all of them due to time, but there are conceptual issues, there are empirical issues, there are practical issues. I just mentioned some of the questions that come up. Some of you are specialists in Islamic sources, the Hadith or the Quran studies. Of course, based on our scriptures, what do the religious leaders teach about the relationship between humans and nature? I mean, we addressed already the notion of the steward, the Al-Khalifa, as based on the Quran. Now, how do we understand that concept of the human being as the steward of nature or the leader of nature? Is this indeed a true interpretation of Quran? I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not a textual scholar. So what do religious leaders teach about the religion, the relationship between humans and nature? How do we, as believers, conceptualize and interpret our ecological challenges? Is it a challenge or is it a crisis? What solutions do believers and faith-based organizations come up with when we talk about religious and ecological issues? What forms does faith-based environmentalism take? How do faith-based organizations position themselves in relation to the government or in relation to other non-governmental actors? So there are many issues to be addressed here, and of course I cannot address all of them. But as we know, Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world. In the West, we sometimes forget that. It is also the 3rd largest polluter in the world. The 3rd largest polluter in the world. I will come back to that later. And happily, there are quite some studies linking religious studies and environmentalism already. Now, what I'm going to do in this paper is I'm not going to address all the questions that come up. I just want to report on some of the projects that I'm involved in or that I was involved in. And well, I just want to come up with some challenges that I see for faculties like yours, Islamic studies and Islamic theology, for addressing this emerging issue of religion and environment. So having said that, as an introduction, I now try to share my screen and I enter. Do you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Clear.
Okay, well, an emerging issue in religious studies, ecology. And once again, as the Fakir Roekman said, this is not addressed well enough by faculties of theology and religious studies in Islamic State universities, at least from my perspective. As I said already, environmental degradation of our Earth is a common challenge to the whole humanity. As I said already, okay, it is good to address pluralism. It is good to address radicalism, and I did myself. But I think there is another challenge here for the whole of humanity to address the environmental degradations. And Indonesia is a major player in this respect, both in terms of the causes and in terms of the solutions. Once again, I'm not going to deal with all issues, but Indonesia is the 4th largest country in the world, population-wise. It has the 2nd largest rainforest in the world, the 2nd largest rainforest in the world. But it is also named 3rd largest polluter, the 2nd biggest contributor to waste, the 2nd highest emitter of greenhouse gas, and the 2nd biggest deforester of the world. So Indonesia plays a major role in the causes of the environmental degradation. Just give you some examples. Indonesia has a population growth of 1.5%, as far as I know, an economic growth of 6%. Now, Jakarta alone produces 6,000 tons garbage every day. 6,000 tons garbage every day. And rivers, we spoke about water already. The rivers such as the Ciliwung in Jakarta and Citarum, West Java, are heavily polluted. Microplastics, chemicals, metals, antibiotics, creating a huge health problem. Indonesia lost already 80% of its forest. It has the 2nd largest rainforest in the world, but it lost already 80%. Now, forests affect the climate change in the whole world with their carbon-absorbing superpowers. You know, planting trees and having rainforest is highly effective carbon capture technology. It's highly efficient and free. So cutting trees, of course, that is your national policy, that's fine, but it affects the whole world, and we have to be conscious about it. Happily, Indonesia is not only a major player in the causing the problem, but also in finding solutions. Indonesia played a major role in the international climate change negotiations. It was the first OPEC country to sign the Kyoto Protocol. It hosted the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Bali, 2007, produced the Bali Roadmap that plays a role until now, and it promised to control the greenhouse gas emission at the meeting of the G20 leaders in 2009. So at the international level, I really see also some efforts of the Indonesian government to engage in environmental concerns, but also in its domestic policy. In a domestic policy, I really see that the Indonesian government at least tries to do something. In 2014, the Indonesian government, the Indonesian Ministry of Environment published the report on environment education in Indonesia to implement environmental education in the 250,000 schools, 250,000 schools and 3,000 universities in Indonesia, among them many Islamic institutions. Between brackets, my question would be to Islamic universities, how far have you gone in implementing environmental education in your campuses? Is it part of your curriculum? I spoke in Jakarta, I spoke in Bandung, I spoke in Semarang, I spoke in Palangkaraya, and then many deans say, well, you know, yeah, we are aware of it, but it is not part of our curriculum. And well, it should be. It should be part of your curriculum. So the Indonesian government and particularly the Ministry of Environment stimulated that. And it also has many programs on, for example, Eco-Pesantren. In already 2008 started the program on Eco-Pesantren and the program on Eco-Mosques. So I really see that there is a challenge and awareness here of the Indonesian government to do something about it. Well, In the Routledge Handbook of Religion and Ecology, published in 2016, my colleague Zainal Bagir of UGM, ICRS, CRCS, and colleague Martiam, they wrote a very interesting chapter in that book, the Handbook of Religion and Ecology, on Islamic theology. And they made the following comment, and I quote from their chapter. Bagir and Martiam argue, quote, that one of the important keys to further Islam and ecology discourse is to pay more attention to the empirical study of the living traditions and practices, or maybe you would say the living hadith, or the empirical study of the living traditions and practices. Such studies have long existed but are not widely accepted because of narrow normative criteria about what makes an idea or a practice Islamic. So there are many empirical studies, they say, but they are not widely accepted because of a narrow normative criteria about what makes an idea or practice Islamic. What needs to be explored is not only the consistency and the coherence of an idea with the canonical sources, but how Muslim communities develop, justify, and defend eco-friendly practices and form their ideas from Islam and ecology through their practices. End of quote. So a very interesting quote, and also for you as a faculty of Islamic theology and philosophy, what makes an idea or a practice to be truly Islamic? And so they argue that the empirical studies are not widely accepted because of narrow normative criteria about what makes an idea or a practice Islamic. I think there is a challenge here for Islamic scholars. Now, that is more or less the theoretical background. In my own university, Radboud University, some of you may know, we speak about empirical theology. Maybe that is a bit strange for you. It seems a contradiction in terminus, because theology does not deal with the empirical world, but with the meta-empirical world. Yet I think as theologians and as scholars of religion, we speak about empirical realities. So we talk about empirical theology. I will come back to that. At ICRS and CRCS, we speak more about an engaged religious studies, so not from a European agnostic point of view, but from engaged religious studies point of view, where the scholar of religion really engages into the practice of environmentalism, trying to combine the struggle, the everyday struggle of human beings in coping with the issues that they are faced with, and our theological and religious studies reflections on these realities, and see how we can develop our normative understandings from this practice. Well, I just another product of our collaboration. We are going to launch this book, result of 2 years collaboration within the Netherlands Indonesia Consortium of Religious Studies. Once again, UIN Yogyakarta is part of the consortium, and I'm very happy that we are presenting now this book edited by Zainal Bagir, Michael Noordkot, a colleague at ICRS, and myself, The Varieties of Religion and Ecology, Dispatches from Indonesia. The book will be launched on 8 July, online and offline, and I'm sure that you will get an invitation to the book launch. So this is the background that I'm talking about. Okay, so what I will do, and as I said already, some issues are introduced already in the long introduction. I spoke about the project framework, basically the empirical theology or engaged religious studies or practical religious studies. Then I will talk about three projects that I'm involved in. The Citarum River project, that is a finished project, PhD project. The third topic is eco-theology in Indonesian Islam, an ongoing project, PhD project that I supervise. The project that I'm conducting now, is Plastic in Pasuruan, East Java, a very challenging topic for myself, and I hope to get some feedback from you. It's really fascinating to do this research. Possibly I will skip number 5, God, Humans and Natures, and then I come to some conclusions. So that's what I'm going to do, and I will finalize at 11 o'clock so that we have enough time for discussion. Okay, so the first project, the first topic is the Citarum River project. Well, as I said already in my introduction, Indonesia is one of the largest contributors to the pollution. It has among the most polluted rivers in the world. One of them is Citarum River in West Java. And well, interestingly, the national government and the provincial government of Bandung has already very interesting integrated visions about how to clean Citarum River, going back to the 1960s, integrated river management. But the practice of river management is quite fragmented. And that is one of the issues that we see. The Indonesian government has a lot of good plans, good visions, broad visions, but when it comes to the implementation, very often it is, well, very fragmented, as all of you know, sometimes mismanaged, sometimes even had corruption involved. So cleaning a river is not a technological issue. It's in fact quite easy. And it is not a financial issue. I mean, there is money enough in Indonesia, but very often it is a management issue and also a behavioral issue. Now, as I said already in my introduction, Dutch universities are not good in everything, but I think we have at least one thing that we are good at, and that is water management, because as you know, 1/3 of our country is below sea level. So we are always concerned with water, both water quality and water quality. So protecting floods, also a concern in Indonesia due to climate change, floodings everywhere, Jakarta, Semarang, but also the water quality. And well, from my university and from Dutch perspective, so I think we can share our expertise in water management, both in terms of quality and quantity of the water. And when we wanted to share our experiences, we started the Alliance for Water, Health and Development, basically a project of co-creation, because the basic vision was that when we want to clean a river, we look at our government. We say, oh, this is a government concern. We don't look at ourselves. We don't look at the faith-based organizations. We don't look at civil society organizations. But as we learned in the Netherlands and in Europe, when we really want to clean up a river, we have to do it together. We have to see it as a common concern. So it isn't something that the industry has to be involved in. Government, civil society organizations, knowledge institutions. So bring government, industry, civil society organizations, among them faith-based organizations, and the knowledge institutes, universities, ITB, Bandung, together, and see how can we solve this problem. Now, of course, being a small Dutch university, we were very aware that we could not solve that problem alone. So what we did, we thought, well, what we can do is we train future leaders in Indonesia to think in an interdisciplinary way. So we had 8 PhD candidates. Some of them were sponsored by MORA, by the Ministry of Religious Affairs in the so-called the 5,000 doctor program. I was very happy that MORA, the Ministry of Religious Affairs, gave money for that, because they saw it was a challenge there. But we trained 8 students, PhD students, in water management, medicine, health science, international economy, development studies, cultural anthropology, and religious studies. And we said, well, let us train them in an interdisciplinary way. So every PhD student was supervised by an Indonesian and a Dutch supervisor coming from 2 disciplines. So I supervised a doctoral student, Muslimah, with a technical background, together with an Indonesian professor in water management. And well, of course, that was, we had to learn our languages. You know, I had no idea about water management. I had no idea about river management. I had to learn the language of an engineer. And the professor of water engineering had no idea about religious studies. He had no idea about spirits or jinns or whatever in the river. And so we learned together and think in an interdisciplinary way. And we thought that that was something that we could contribute to the future leaders of Indonesia to think in a more comprehensive way. And of course, the team, it was an interdisciplinary team, including water management, medicine, health science, international economy, development studies, culture, anthropology. In the beginning, religious studies was not involved because they really saw it as a technical issue and a management issue. But being aware, as the rector said already, Indonesia is a highly religious country. So when you want to do something about river management, you really have to bring in a religious studies perspective. So happily, I was asked to be involved and to bring in a religious studies perspective. Well, with my doctoral student, and thinking in terms of the tension that Zain al-Bagir and Jim Martiam introduced, the clash between norms and practices, we asked ourselves, how come that Indonesia has the largest of the most polluted rivers of the world? And that Indonesia is one of the largest producers of waste, whereas it is also the largest Muslim community in the world. And purity is the core value of Islam. So what is the relation between the purification, the purification idea in Islam, particularly when it comes to water and ablution water? You clean yourself 5 times per day with water, which is heavily polluted. Antibiotics, chemicals, metals in the water, you wash yourself. So purification being a core value of Islam, but the water is polluted. And we try to understand the contrast between pollution and purification. And we did that from the theory, the cognitive dissonance theory, arguing that the clash between our norms and practices is seen as unpleasant. And we know the example of smoking. We all know that smoking is very unhealthy for us, and that we should not smoke. But in practice, many people smoke, and then we have all kinds of mechanisms to rationalize. Okay, yes, I know smoking is not very helpful, but you know, my father was a smoker, and he became 90 years old, and so we try to harmonize our cognition and our practice. And well, the same happens with environment. We know that many things are very unhealthy for us, but yet we find all kinds of mechanisms to harmonize our practices with our Islamic ideas. So we try to study that inconsistency, doing a study in 2 sites, a rural site and an urban side. The rural side was Kampung Mahmud, and the urban side was Cikondewa Kaler. For those of you who are familiar with Bandung, they are close to Bandung, and they are connected through the grave of a saint, Eyang Mahmud, and there is a symbol of their connectedness through the grave for this saint in both locations. Well, I cannot go into all the details, that would go too far, and if you are more interested in it, you can read some of the studies. But what we found, so we interviewed people in both locations and asking them about the connection between the purification or purity as a core value in Islam and the pollution of the water, both in the rural and the urban side. And then many people said, well, there is no relation. You know, there is no relation between the pollution of the Citarum River and the idea of a purification in Islam. The water, the pollution of the water, that is a government concern. We are not involved in that. We, as a religious community, are only concerned with the otherworldly realities. We are concerned with the spiritual realities. Just one quote to illustrate, and I think Fadi Lukman referred to that in the beginning, that there is a clash or a gap between the ecology issue and the religious issue. I quote from one of our interviewees. The religious issue, the religious assembly, has no relation with garbage and the Citarum, because they, so garbage and Citarum, are concerns of the local government, the community association, and the neighborhood association. The religious council is only concerned with religion. And so that is something that I found very interesting. And I'm sorry to say, because you know, we in the West, we always think that we are a secularized society. So people in the West are said to be very secular because we marginalize religion to the private domain, or we are not religious at all. But I find quite some secularization in Indonesia. As I said already, I went to ITB many times, ITB Bandung. We spoke about ecology. I went to ETS many times. But when I ask, okay, but you are a believer yourself, how do you relate that to your religion, to the idea of purity? And they say, oh, sorry, you know, I only look at it from a technological point of view. You know, I have no idea about religion. So if you are interested in that, go to the Kiai, because they know much better. So from a religious point of view, I found that interesting that we speak about secularization in the West, but in our study, we found quite some secularization in Indonesia, separating a more technological view, dealing with water management and waste management, and the religious or theological perspective. There was only one exception, and that was the artist. Well, oh, sorry. Just I make some comments on the pictures. This is an example in Kampung Mahmud, where people were thinking about well water, digging wells. Now, as you know, in Islam, pure water is running water. Of course, the Prophet Muhammad, praised be his name, did not speak about chemicals, and he did not speak about metals, and he did not speak about antibiotics in the water. That was simply outside his worldview. So there are quite some Islamic or hadith saying, well, the pure water is running water, or pure water has no taste, it has no color, it has no smell. And people try to adjust their Islamic perspective with the reality of the shortage of pure water. So what we see here is a well So people dig wells. Well, well water is, of course, still water. It is not running water. So from an Islamic perspective, it is not pure. So what people do, they make it running water by pumping them up through pipes. And then they say, well, this is running water. So this is in accordance with the hadith, because pure water is running water. The water that comes out of the pipe is heavily polluted. But of course, there is this clash between the Islamic worldview and the technical worldview. Here again, another example, as most of you are aware, in Islam, you have the regulation that you have a basin that is in harmony with the Islamic teaching. I think 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter and 30 centimeters deep. So Muslims wash their feet, and of course there is running water because there is a water tap there. But the reality is the water in the basin is polluted. That is the reality. But you think, okay, we pray and we create, how we use applied technology to be in harmony with the Islamic teaching. Well, one of the exceptions that people really made a connection between an Islamic or a religious perspective and the ecological issue were artists in Bandung. Here you see a picture of Tisna Sanjana, which is a famous local artist who washes the feet of his mother in a basin and then drank the water, showing the power of rituals. Here you see also a local ritual, the Ke-Ru in Sundanese, Ke-Ru ritual in front of the governance office. Now, Ke-Ru in Sundanese means dirt, but they translated it in Ke-Ru, towards the spirit. So protesting in front of the governor's house that the government really has to be engaged in cleaning up the river, but connecting it to a religious worldview. So coming to a conclusion in this part, we saw that there was quite some secularization in the interviewees, or distinguishing or separating between the material and spiritual world, except artists who made that connection. And I really urge also scholars, philosophers, religious studies scholars, theologians, to make that connection, to look at, in this case, the reality of pollution of water, being a religious symbol, particularly in Islam, and connect it to a philosophical or theological perspective. So this was something that was very striking to us. So in a next project, we said, okay, let us see how the clash between religion and development has been overcome in faith-based organizations. Because we said, well, maybe this secularization is caused by the fact that indeed, if I have a study in water management or in engineering, I don't have a background in Islamic studies. So when I want to make that connection, I say, well, you know, you go to the Kiai, or you go to an Islamic scholar, because they are learned in that. So we asked ourselves in the next project, how is this tension bridged in faith-based organizations like Nahdlatul Ulama or Muhammadiyah? So we did not look at the lived religion, at the everyday religion, but we looked at it in the next project. And this, in fact, this is the project that I'm engaged in supervising, a PhD candidate now. How within the faith-based organizations such as Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah, they speak about the relationship between theology and ecology. And of course, we saw quite some attempts to bridge the clash between, on the one hand, the technological worldview and the religious outview. I was quite impressed by, you know, only if you only look at the vocabulary, and if you look at the book titles, unfortunately, my Bahasa Indonesia is not good enough to read all those books, but I was really impressed by the many books about eco-theology, eco-dakwah, eco-mosque, eco-pesantren, eco-jihad, eco-halal, and so on, and so on, and so on. So rich vocabulary, eco-Sufism, rich vocabulary showing the concern from Islamic studies perspective. And I said already, it requires quite some reinterpretation in Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic law, and the Islamic theology. Now I understand that Ushuluddin means the foundation of Islam. So it needs quite some reinterpretation, because as I said already, Prophet Muhammad, praise be upon him, did not speak about microplastics. He did not speak about chemicals. He did not speak about pesticides in the water. And so we have to reinterpret our sources. And from the literature, of course, we very often see that the Nahdlatul Ulama is seen as a traditionalist movement, and Muhammadiyah is seen as a modernist movement. Now, I don't go into detail. You are all scholars of religion, so you know much better than I what those meanings stand for. But I expected from the literature that in NU we would find an attitude going back to nature. You know, small is beautiful perspective, or an environmentalism perspective in philosophy. So let's do away with plastics. Let us go back to organic farming, back to nature, and so on. Whereas in Muhammadiyah, I expected to find an eco-modernist perspective. Say, well, back to nature is quite naive. How far do we have to go back to nature? Because once the human being started to cultivate, we started to exploit nature. So back to nature is a bit naive. The only way forward is to invest in green technologies, in green or clean technologies, to stimulate a circular economy, not to go back to nature, but to invest in new technologies that really make our environment and our material world more clean and healthy. So smart, not small, but smart technologies. So that was our assumption. And so we are doing many interviews. Well, in fact, my PhD student is doing many interviews. And what we can conclude so far, of course, this is an ongoing project, is that indeed we find both trends in Islam. So we both find that back to nature approach, or the environmentalism approach on the one hand, and the eco-modern approach, the investing in clean and green technologies on the other. But we find it in both. We find it in both organizations. So we cannot say that NU is typically an environmentalist approach, and Muhammadiyah has more a modernist or eco-modernist approach. No, in both organizations we found both trends. So that is a finding already. And as was introduced by the rector already, many interviewees refer indeed to the image of the Al-Khalifa, the man as man, human being, as not man, men and women, as being the leaders of the creation. And well, here again, from an Islamic theology perspective, we really need further reflection on that. Because indeed, in our tradition, we do find some texts that indeed suggest that we are above nature. But there are in our tradition also texts and narratives that say that we are equal, because we both human beings and nature are created by God, by Allah, and so one is not above the other, but we are equal. And so how do we define the relationship between human beings and nature as equal partners from an Al-Khalifa perspective? I think, by the way, this not only applies to Islam, this applies also to Christianity. So how can we reflect as scholars of theology on the Al-Khalifa notion and to find a more balanced approach to the human being as leader or above nature and human beings as equal to nature. By the way, the word balancing, that is for those of you who are familiar with Islamic thought, of course, quite common. What I see in Islam nowadays in Indonesia, whether you see it as a moderate or progressive Islam, I'm not go into that detail, the labels that you give to it, or the labels that NU and Muhammadiyah give, being moderate Islam or progressive Islam. But I do see that balancing, or being moderate, balancing the extremes, is a key idea in Islam at the moment. So this is also something for discussion. We can come back to it later. So I see this approach here. We see a pesantren where the santri pray for water because there was a lack of water. And here we see another example in Pasuruan where there is a technical procedure to clean ablution water, wadu water, the ablution water, to make it pure through a purification process. The problem is already, how do we convince the people in the village that this water is indeed clean or pure? Because very many people are skeptical about it. And here there is a task indeed for Islamic scholars to convince people that indeed the ablution water that is purified through this system is clean and can be used for ablution again. Well, I'm going to conclude. Just I give one other example, the example that I'm involved in now, and maybe you can help me on that, and maybe you have some ideas about it already. What we noted, and I refer to this technical installation of purifying ablution water. The third project that I'm involved now is plastic waste in Pasuruan. I started my presentation with this picture. It is Welang River, heavily polluted with plastic. And many of you, well, this is simply Pasuruan, but I think you can make this picture almost everywhere. One of the things that is very striking to me, and once again, maybe some of you have ideas on it and can help me with that. In Pasuruan and in many other places, I see that there are pesantren who have income generating projects. They produce air mineral, so the mineral water, and they distribute it in plastic bottles. So you have Al Yassini water, you have the Santri water in Sidogiri. Now, Sidogiri is a very old pesantren. I think Fadi is laughing, so maybe you recognize this problem. Sidogiri pesantren is a huge pesantren, I think about 20,000 Santri. It has numerous companies, it has shops. It produces its own water, and mineral water, Santri, distributed in many pesantren, but it uses plastic bottles. And so we asked ourselves, hey, but NU has a fatwa against the use of plastic. You know, there is a huge debate in 2019. There was a national conference. It was debated at length. There was a clear decision that, and I try to understand. And so the ulama said, well, plastic is not haram, but it is makruh, and so it is not forbidden, but it is not advisable. So in fact, we should reduce the use of plastic. But in reality, the pesantren, and also the pesantren that claim to be eco pesantren, they produce a lot of plastic. Distributing thousands, 100,000 bottles, and everything, even the food and the vegetables are packed in plastic. So we try to understand, and that is our next project, using a living lab approach. So as I said already, not a lab in a university developing a clean technology. You know, we have bioplastics. We have fiber bottles that are 100% degradable. 100% degradable. So the technology is there, but it is not yet accepted at grassroots level. So our idea is, okay, we bring the ITS people from ITS Surabaya to pesantren, to Sidogiri. We bring the KI, we bring the CEO of the company that brings that produces the bottles, and of course we bring the civil society organizations to that place and say, okay, how can we solve this problem? Because we don't need the plastic. You know, we can. The technology is there to distribute the plastic, to distribute the water in bottles that are 100% degradable, or maybe 70% degradable. Maybe it is a bit more expensive. Maybe people have to pay 100 or 200 rupiah more. So also from an economic perspective, we look, okay, how can we produce, how can we stimulate a new practice, being profitable, being because there's nothing against economy. I completely understand that a pesantren wants to make money as an income generating project. Nothing wrong with that, from my perspective, but do it in an eco-friendly way, as NU has clearly propagated into 2019. And so how can we do that in a cost-effective way? And that is possible. So by bringing all expertise together in one spot and brainstorm about possible solutions. So that is what we are going to do now. So going back to this, to the problem that Zainal Bagir and Jim Marthiam indicated, and there is a conflict between norms and practices in Islam. From the theological perspective, I see quite some interesting new endeavors to promote an eco-theology, to promote clean and green technology. But the reality is, as we can see in the picture, we don't practice it. This, the example of the Al Yassini water produced in a pesantren that claims to be eco-pesantren, but distributing the water in an in plastic bottles, which does not make sense to me. So how can we overcome that dilemma? Well, coming to a conclusion, and some issues were indicated already. I went to many pesantren in Bandung and all over Indonesia, and I see then the slogans like this: agama dibangun di atas kebersihan. Religion is built on purity. Yeah, that's a nice idea. But how can we overcome that clash between the norm as we propagate and the reality that we see in our pesantren? And well, I see a challenge here for a faculty of Islamic theology and Islamic study of religion. And as I said in response to the rector's speech, you have many awards, award for scholarship and for good in scholarship, awards for student appreciation. But try to be also a green campus, not only in your teaching, but also in practice, or not only in practice, but also in your teaching. And so one of the challenges, that was the topic of my speech, that I see for Islamic institutes like yours, UIN Yogyakarta, is to bridge indeed the green or clean technology perspective with a theological vision, inspiring people at grassroots to really overcome the ecological challenge. Well, having said this, I think we have quite some stuff for discussion. So I give the floor back to the master of ceremony, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wisden, for the interesting presentation. His presentation makes our eyes open that Indonesia is not really clean enough for living, especially when we look at the river. Let me to note some of the presentation from Mr. Wisden. Is about the Indonesia is a major player in terms of cause and solution. He already mentioned about the river that's very not really nice to be called river because full of the garbage. And he also noticed about the management of Indonesian management in looking for the solution for the management of deforestation, also open land forest. We know that right now the viral thing is about the the mining company in one of the Sangaji is, if I am wrong, correct me. And also he noticed about the Indonesia is one of the biggest polluted river in the world, but also why is Indonesia? Why should be in Indonesia, which is full the biggest Muslim in the world? Why should be Indonesia? Yeah, that's ironic thing that we can learn from his presentation. And also let me mention one of the quote of Muslim know. Anadofatu minal iman, which means the cleanness is part of the piety. But yeah, how make it clear in our activity, in our mind, and everything. So everyone, ladies and gentlemen, I let you to ask question for Pak Wisden, and also maybe your perspective about the theme today. I have received one of the lecturer that wants to ask to Mr. Wisden. Her name is Khadijah. Maybe Khadijah, can you explain your question to Mr. Wisden right now?
Okay, thank you very much for moderator. I will. Good afternoon, Mr. This afternoon discussion is very interesting, talking about the relationship between religion and environment. Discussion that is still rare, even though the reality of the environment and climate change is already very dire and dangerous. My question are, first, why this topic still rare in Islamic universities, especially in Indonesia? And the second is how local wisdom can help maintain environmental sustainability in Indonesia, like Lubuk Larang in Sumatera and Hutan Keramat in Java. Yes, I think enough for my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mbak Khadijah, for the question. And also, Mr. Whitson, that someone is already write the question in the chat room. Let me read the question. It's from Ali Usman. I want to ask, can we talk about Indonesian issue without involving religion? And how was the experience in the West? Perhaps two questions for this term. So maybe Mr. Whitson can answer their question. The time is yours.
Okay, well, in relation to the first question, why rare in Islamic universities, I think you are in a better position to answer that question. You know, I just an outsider and I observe things. But I think Fadi Lukman in his presentation already indicated the separation between technology and theology. And of course, the dean referred to the interdisciplinary interdisciplinary approach. But honestly speaking, I don't see it that much in Indonesia. And by the way, not only in Indonesia, that also applies to many universities in the West. So yeah, indeed, why rare in Islamic universities? I think it has something to do with this idea that religion deals with the other world, or the spiritual realm, and in science and technology we deal with this world, and we are not yet able to combine. Although I mean, I refer to Sayyid Nasr. Already from the 1960s, there were Islamic scholars who really tried to look at it from an interdisciplinary point of view. As he clearly indicated, well, more from a philosophical point of view. So there does not need to be a tension between theology and religion and technology. But yeah, it is not yet done. Well, how local traditions can be involved in? Well, that is an interesting question, because when I look at the ICRS and I look at the CRCS, some of you are familiar with the Wednesday Forum at ICRS and CRCS. I see quite some studies on local traditions. And if you look at the book that we are going to launch at 8 July, and I hope some of you can join the presentation, there are 8 chapters or 9 chapters, and there are 4 chapters, 3 or 4 chapters that deal with indigenous religions. And of course, I can understand that is a hot topic in Indonesia, because recently the Indonesian government recognized the indigenous belief, or not called agama, but a belief to be recognized. So I do see that is a challenge. And indeed, I think that we can learn a lot from the local traditions, because there the relationship between human being and nature seems to be more equal. But as I said in my introduction, let us not forget our own rich traditions. We don't need to go to Hinduism. We don't need to go to Buddhism. We don't need to go to Chinese religions. We don't need to go to the indigenous religions. Yes, we can learn from them, but we have a rich tradition and sources of knowledge in our own belief systems, going back to 10th century philosophers in Islam, and we can learn a lot from them. So that would be my answer to the first question, and also my challenge to a faculty like yours to take into account your own Islamic tradition, where scholars make that connection between science and technology and Islam. Well, in relation to the second question, of course, you in Indonesia, you cannot overcome environmental degradation. You cannot address environmental challenges without religious institutions, as has been recognized by the Indonesian government. According to statistics, but statistics are not always reliable. About 90% of the Indonesian population says that it is religious. To me, that is a bit debatable, because you put it on your identity card, I'm a Muslim, or I'm Catholic or Protestant or wherever. But we can assume that indeed, for the majority of people in Indonesia, religion is important. So, yeah, and I think many people at grassroots level, they trust their TI, they trust the Islamic leaders. Maybe they trust the Islamic leaders more than the government officials. So there is a task, I would say, for Islamic scholars to take the lead. Yeah, the question of the West is interesting. How do we relate? How do we relate that in the West? I could give another lecture on that, but I'm not going to do that. But it is interesting that, as you know, Europe, and particularly my country, is very secular. That means the overwhelming majority, more than 70 or 75%, would say that they are not affiliated to a religious institution, that they are secular, or that they don't affiliate themselves to a church or a religion. About 20 or 25% say that they are Muslim or Christian or Catholic or whatever. But it is through the environmentalism debate that many young people nowadays recognize the indigenous or primal, maybe let me say not religions, but the spirituality, so the pre-Christian spiritualities, going back to the pre-Christian era, where we have more nature religion. So not God above nature, but God in nature, seeing the sacred values in nature itself. That many young people nowadays recognize the spiritual dimension of this debate without saying that, oh, I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Christian, or I'm Catholic. And so that is interesting that via the environmental debate, various young people recognize the spiritual values of our own tradition. And so I think for scholars of religion in the West, there is the challenge to also show to them that you don't need to go back to the pre-Christian tradition or the pre-Islamic tradition, going back to what they call paganism. I'm not sure if some of you are aware of that, the neo-paganism. Neo-paganism movement saying, well, before Christianity or before Islam, people prayed to the trees and prayed to the water. So we call that paganism. But in fact, they saw the religious value of nature. And so they called themselves neo-paganism, not seeing it as a negative term, as we would say from a theological perspective, paganism. So we don't pray to God, we don't pray to Allah, but we pray to a tree, which is a silly activity, even a pagan activity. But they reinterpret the pre-Christian tradition as seeing the sacredness of nature, and that's why they call themselves neo-paganist. Of course, for us as scholars of religion and theologians, the issue is how can we relate this new understanding of the sacredness of nature to our own traditions. And for Islam, I'm not an expert on that, but I do see some of the scholars who call themselves eco-Sufist, eco-Sufism, that there might be a tradition in Islam that really could help us to go into that direction. But once again, I leave that to you as Islamic scholars and experts. I'm not an expert on that. So that's I think enough for the two questions that were raised.
Okay, thank you for the answer for the some of the question from Ms. Khadijah and also Mr. Ali Usman. And I just realized that there are two people here that wants to ask you directly. There are Mr. Novian Widya Dharma and also Mr. Fadil Lukman. Perhaps I can give the chance to Mr. Novian Widya Dharma to deliver his question. The time is yours.
Thank you. Okay. Yes, Professor Wilson. Okay. Last year, here in Indonesia, we have in the early of pandemic, we have debate between science and religions, very intense here. So we have this. So I will underline here, from my perspective, that's the difference between science and religion concerning human. In science, human, our species is just one of many species. But in religions, we see that our species is very important. So we see our species is very special, very important. So, okay, this is related to your discussion today. So it is religion who have responsibility to give perspective that our is very special. So can we go beyond this? So if also last year we have Black Lives Matter. So we deal with racism. So in racism, some race feel superior, and today it's not acceptable anymore. This racism is not okay. For today, it's not acceptable. Can we go the same way in species? So Dawkins thought it as a speciesism. So we feel that our species is special. So I offer this one. We go to beyond speciesism. But if we look in the Indonesian context today, it is far. It is still far to go. Okay, even in our species, we have a problem here. You can see that humanity is we can spirited by many factors. So go beyond that is very still far to go. What's your opinion about this? Can religion here change the perspective, not to see ourselves as a special being, just as the same like another species in this planet? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Novian Widya Dharma. And next to move to Mr. Fadli Lukman to deliver his question. The time is yours.
Thank you very much, Mbak Afni Hafsah. First of all, I would thank Professor Van Wilson for a presentation that you raise a significant important challenge to us in the faculty to formulate the normative vision of religion that address this environmental challenge. I knew already some bachelor thesis on this issue, but certainly it has yet to form a mainstream concern. It is even more significant that one other keyword from you is interdisciplinary approach. That integration and interconnection has been our core in Sunan Kalijaga for at least a decade now, It is ironic or unpleasant to see that environmental issue has yet to be an issue in the Faculty of Religion in Islamic thought. I guess Bu Inayah would be agree with that. My question is, let me see this way. Let me put it this way. Forest is technically distant from people, but corporation is the main player behind deforestation. It's hard to address. Let's see the Citarum case you have raised earlier. I saw the commentary from Deutsche Welle about Citarum. I expect you to have seen that as well. The documentary reveals that the real source of dangerous material in Citarum is not household waste, but textile industry. So yeah, it's already a challenge to talk to people about sanitary. But it is easier to common people to talk about this. What about speaking about theology to industry? You mentioned that your project employed interdisciplinary approach and bring relevant stakeholders together, including industry. I'm wondering, what is the religious language or religious vision or religious idea or religious rhetoric that appeals to industry? Yes, Nahdlatul Ulama and Muhammadiyah can preach people, we should clean and something. But when we are dealing with corporation, what kind of religious rhetoric that can we use? What kind of religious issue that appeals to them? I mean, it is our biggest issue in Citarum, not household industry. Of course, plastic is something big from our household waste, but the real cause in Citarum is industry, not the people. And I mean, in a blatant expression, how can theology speak to capitalisms in this issue? What is the impact of this religious rhetoric to capitalisms? Thank you. That is my question.
Okay. Well, two interesting questions. So in response to the first question of Novian, I think you referred to the tension between a scientific worldview and a religious worldview in terms of the image of man. Huh? Of course, going back to the Industrial Revolution and Enlightenment in the West, we clearly can see that the scientific worldview emphasis on only one image of man, focusing on man as a master of nature, a human being as entitled to exploit nature based on the scriptures. I think the rector referred to that already. Not only in Islam, but also in Christianity and in Judaism. And of course, we can see clearly from the West that somehow there is a relation between this Christian understanding of man as the leader of nature and the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution leading to immense exploitation of the earthly resources. So there are many studies showing that indeed it was Christianity that was the major cause of environmental degradation, because there is this clear link between the Christian worldview, at least a certain interpretation of the Christian worldview, and enlightenment leading to industrial revolution and exploitation. That is clearly the case. On the other hand, as was referred to we have many traditions in both Islam and Christianity that bridge that gap between the human beings being the master of nature and human being as a participant of nature, or even partner of nature. And yeah, once again, I refer to Sayyid Nasr, one of the first scholars in Islam, who clearly referred to that as a challenge. And I refer to mystic traditions. So in Islam, where you really see another image of human beings, where human being is not above nature, or where the human being is not a guardian. So even, you know, even the terminology we protect nature, or we are the guardians of nature. But even in that terminology, when we say we have the responsibility to protect nature, we place ourselves above nature already. Or when we say we are the guardians of nature, we place ourselves above nature. And I think we really have to look at it in a different way. One of our interviewees, a very interesting, a woman who is active in the Kartini Kandeng movement in Kartini Hills. Some of you may know. She said, well, you know, nature can do without human beings, but human beings cannot do without nature. So that really sees that we are on that nature is even above human beings. So in response to the first question, yes, I do see that this clash between a scientific worldview and a religious worldview. But from my point of view, that need not be the case. And once again, I urge you, as a faculty of Islamic theology and philosophy, to rethink this notion of Al-Khalifa and many other Islamic sources, where you really have a different perspective of human being as not being above nature, but as being an equal partner with nature, both creatures by the one God. So that would be my response to the question of Novian. So let me go to the question of Fadi Lukman. First of all, your observation that although UIN Jogja stresses the interconnection between disciplines, or the interdisciplinary approach, it is not yet achieved. I don't see that only in Jogja, as I said. I see it in UIN Bandung, I see it in UIN Jakarta. I spoke in UIN Palangkaraya. I was in Semarang. So that is really something that has yet to develop. By the way, as I said, not only in Indonesia. In Europe, it's the same issue. But I really think we have to go into that direction. Well, in relation to the Bandung project or the Citarum River project, you made quite some interesting comments, and I could talk 1 more hour about it, and I'm not going to do that. But just let me make some comments. First of all, you say that the industry is the main cause of pollution. We know from not only our research, not our research, but many other evidences that this is not true. The main cause of pollution in Citarum River is household-based. 60–70% of the pollution of Citarum is simply you and me throwing garbage to the river and don't take care about the river. So it is not true that the industry is the main cause of pollution. But there is a psychological effect here. People indeed say, oh, you know, it is the textile industry. You all know the many textile industries along the Chitaram River, and they pollute the river. You see the river colors yellow or even red. I have many pictures where you really see the color of the river is red or yellow because they clean the textile using the water. And then people say, you know, it is because of the industry. And then they say, well, you know, it is about the corruption. You know, it is because the industry, they collaborate with the government collaborates and so on. Yeah, but you know, this is part of the problem. When we look at the other, who starts? Of course, for you and me, it is easy to say, well, you know, it is the industry. They are the main cause. And then I just, that gives a kind of a legitimation. Yeah, you know, it is not me. I just throw my rubbish because it is polluted anyway. We have to start somewhere. And that is where this idea of co-creation comes from. This is a common concern. We have to do it together. It is indeed the industry. I don't deny that they are cause. It is the government. There is mismanagement. There is corruption. Sure. It is faith-based organizations. It is you and me. It is knowledge institutes. They have to collaborate to come together to see this as a common challenge. How can we solve this problem? I come back to your question about religious vocabulary later. But let me go back to the experience of Chitaro River. And the way we started. We have quite some experience with cleaning up rivers in Europe. In fact, my university, and that's why I did not want to go into detail, but my university was involved in the River Rhine project, cleaning up the river. Now, River Rhine, as some of you who visited Germany or Europe know that the River Rhine was heavily polluted in the 1950s. Now it is clean. And that was really because this was a collaborative effort of bringing together many partners, showing that we really had to collaborate together to clean the river, and that it is profitable, also for the industry. Nobody enjoys a dirty river. But when the river is clean, and we see, hotels are flourishing, water sports is flourishing, restaurants are flourishing, nice houses being built. So and you have to convince people that cleaning up a river in the short run is indeed costly, but in the long run, it is profitable for all of us. So that is one thing. For those of you who visit my university situated in Nijmegen, all our buses, public transport, run on biogas. Now, the biogas is produced by the waste that we take from the River Rhine. So we recycle the waste, we produce biogas. All our public buses run on biogas. This is simply, the technology is there. It is profitable. It is not so complicated. Now you refer to deforestation being a problem in Chitaram River. Now, when we came to Chitaram River, we indeed saw that all the experts did a good job. The water engineer, they normalized the river, so they deck out the river, and they put the mud next to the river. And then we saw small children playing in the mud, and you know their hands were really affected and all kinds of diseases. So no interdisciplinary approach. You solve one problem, you normalize the river, but you create an enormous health problem because there was no connection. Or another issue, the government promoted digging wells. Now, I referred already to the religious issues, that well water is still water, so it is not pure. So you have to find a religious justification for well water. But if you ask people to dig wells, 40 million people depend on well water, the groundwater goes down. So you create an even larger problem. So instead of cleaning up the river, you don't clean the river, but you say, well, you know, we have to dig wells. But by digging wells, you create an even bigger problem. So here again, a lack of integrated vision. And then, of course, when you clean up the river, you face another, you face a more economic problem. There are people who depend on plastic waste. People collect the waste, they sell it, and they make some income. So you have to find another way to give those people income. Referring to deforestation, well, we know that indeed the farmers in the hills, by cutting trees, they contribute to the pollution. So we say, well, stop cutting trees, but then you have to find another way of giving them a source of income. So all issues are related. When you clean up the river, and when you say to farmers, don't cut the trees, yeah, you have to be creative and think, how can we find other ways of making an income for the farmers who used to cut trees, or for the collectors of plastic who earn their income by collecting plastic. So you have to give them another source of income. So that's how we have to interconnect the integrated river management. Well, and that's what we wanted to show in our project. Well, once again, I can go back. I can talk for many hours about this. One, of course, is legislation. Our legislation has to be more strict, and it has to be implemented. Now, of course, I know that the Indonesian government tries to be strict in lawmaking on environmental issues, but the law is not always enforced. I think here also we have a challenge as scholars of religion. And yeah, our religious vocabulary, of course, that was your main question. I see, well, my personal vision. I see many of our interviewees saying, well, you know, it is the market. We don't need plastic, but, you know, it is the industry that enforces us to use plastic. And that has to do with capitalism. Yeah, to a certain extent, that has to do with capitalism. But we also can look at it from another perspective of a circular economy perspective. And I think also from the religious perspective. Once again, I go back to the Al-Khalifa idea. How can we balance? How can we balance our understanding as a human being, being the leader of nature, the Al-Khalifa, and as a guardian of nature? And well, from my perspective, I think a challenge from a religious vocabulary perspective is indeed, how can we find the religious vocabulary to balance between the two images of man? For me, as I said already, for myself, I don't see any problem in making money, because when you are an entrepreneur, when you have a factory, that is your core business, to make money. For myself, I don't see a problem in that, as long as you do it in a just and eco-friendly way. And one other comment and then I stop. You know, the CEOs and the managers of those factories and the managers in our municipalities, and they are also members, most of them are members of faith-based organizations. And that is something for me that I have to understand, that if you are, you know, a manager of a factory, but in your private life, you are a Muhammadiyah member, or you are an NU member, or you are in the ministry, or you are in the government, and you have your political outlook, but in your private life, you are a member of NU or Muhammadiyah or whatever faith-based organization. So how can we combine this religious vocabulary with our other positions that we have in the industry or in the government? And I think that is a major challenge. Going back to the Pasuruan project, in Pasuruan, the company is, of course, making money, but it is related to a pesantren. And even there you see that there is a separation between the company that produces the ayam mineral and the pesantren focusing on religious issues. I'm going to stop because I can continue for hours to talk about this issue, but I think that the point is clear.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Whitson, and we still have about 20 minutes to the 12 o'clock. So there is a question again, maybe from the audience. I read in the chat room that Mr. Abdul Hafid is already write the question, but maybe I please you to deliver the question directly. Mr. Abdul Aziz, if you please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning and good evening all. Thank you for this time to me. I think it's a good topic about religious and environment. In my perspective and experience about the topics, there were two main problems in seriously perspective about that. The first, many countries had engaged an international forum to discuss any term about environment, namely global warming or climate change, but it had a contradict to their own vision in about investment, capital investment or industry development. So not can be solve the problem, but make the developing the problem in it. And the second, in Islamic religion, there are many verses in Al-Quran about environmental management. Yeah. But the Muslim daily life not so interact by the base. Ayah in Surah Ar-Rum, the 41 verse. It relate the perspective of the country management. So is the weakness in daily life based on Al-Quran as the way of life of them. So it's needed how to compose one concept, as a standard operational procedure to moving that relation between religion and environment management. As our experience in 2012 in Bogor City, held by Makkah, Muslim action at climate change, but not continue today. And when Mr. Rahmat Bitular and Nabil Makarim held us the Minister of State Minister of Environment, there were a declaration between two ministries in Indonesia about to celebrate a program that named Eko Pesantren by Ministry of Religion and Ministry for Environment by Rahmat Bitular. But again and again, it's not continued. So the complicated wisdom in Al-Quran not so applicated in daily life of Muslim faith. So it's unfortunately thing. So I think we need a SOP, standard operational procedure, to implement in the daily practice. So climate change, global warming, contamination in ecosystem, and it's not so continue by our perspective. I think Mr. Wilson have a comparison perspective by the other countries. I hope your explanation about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul Hafid, for the question, and I please Mr. Wijan to answer the question. The time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Abdul Hadid. Well, you raised two questions. Indeed, the environment challenge is a global issue, global warming. So we cannot solve this only in Indonesia, and we cannot solve it only in Malaysia or Singapore or wherever. And we have to solve it in a global level. You are completely correct. And as I said already, well, Indonesia is one of the major causes of global warming, but it is also one of the major players internationally. And of course, we are very happy in that. I refer to Indonesia being the first OPEC country to sign the Kyoto Protocol. I refer to Indonesia organizing the Bali conference and drafting the Bali roadmap, which plays a role in the whole debate until today. So that is very, very, very good. And yeah, indeed, it is a global issue. We have to do it together. Now, I refer to, for example, the European Union. As you may know, the European Union has a policy to have emission neutral economy in the year 2025. We have about 30 years to go, completely emission neutral. But of course, this is only Europe. Without the United States and without China, it doesn't mean. So you only can give an example. But for Indonesia, I did not mention that. Some of you may know that the Indonesian government has engaged in free trade negotiations with the European Union since 20 years ago already. Those negotiations are going on. I have seen many ministers coming through The Hague and then from The Hague to Brussels, where they have the talks on the free trade negotiation, so free trade between Indonesia and the European Union, which is very good. But of course, Indonesian investors, by the way, that is also something that I relate to the question to Fadik Lukman. When I'm an investor in Indonesia now, and I know that maybe within 10 years or 20 years, there will be somehow a free trade agreement between Indonesia and the European Union. That means I have to obey also the green policies of the European Union. And that means as a businessman, I would be foolish if I invest now in dirty technologies, whereas maybe after 10 years or 20 years, I know that I have access to European market. So when I'm clever now, I invest in green technologies. And well, as some of you who know me, I'm a very optimistic. I see just before I came, 2 or 3 days before I came, there was a Dutch civil society group that brought the Shell company, the Dutch Shell company, to the Dutch court because they said, well, you know, the Shell company has to obey to the Kyoto Protocol and so on and so on. And they won. They won. So I'm an optimist. You know, this is only a small beginning, and this is only Shell company, but other companies will follow. Other civil society organizations will follow. I'm aware of the very successful constitutional jihad of the Muhammadiyah in Indonesia. Small examples where you really can do something. And we really have to go into that direction. So yeah, in reaction to your first comment, yes, it is a global issue and we have to address it globally. And well, as a believer, I'm a believer myself. I think that our faith really inspire us to be optimists, to have hopes for a better future, and really, I think we can do something, but we must do it globally. I completely agree with you. And once again, the Indonesian government plays an important role in that. Yeah, on your second question, that is also a very interesting question. I'm not going to deal with the Quran studies. You are much better in that. And of course, I know that there are many verses in the Quran that speak about environment and that speak about water. But I'm not a scholar of Quranic studies. You are much better in that, so I really challenge you in that. But you refer to another important issue, namely, yes, I'm aware of this BOGO conference. I'm aware of the collaboration between the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Religious Affairs in promoting the eco-pesantren.
Yes.
I'm also aware of the same endeavor of the eco mosques, the
Yes.
eco mosque program. But one of the issues that I'm sorry to say that you know, the Indonesian government, when it plans something, everything is big and huge planning. I think some of you are more aware of that. The eco mosque program wanted to have 1,000 eco mosques in the year 2020, if I remember well. Yeah, you know, that is simply not realizable. So I think we must think more in terms of small pilot studies. Because having 1,000 eco mosques in the year 2020 is simply impossible to be realized. So make it smart. Set your goals of something that can be achieved in a realistic way. And I also saw that in Bandung, you know, huge planning, broad visions, but not smart enough, not realizable because it's simply too big. And well, that is something also that I learned in the Bandung project. Don't think small. So I don't, that is my personal conviction. I don't believe in going back to nature. I'm sorry for those environmentalists who think that is the way forward. So I don't think in terms of small is beautiful. For me, that is more too romantic or than many issues. Yeah, how far do we have to go back in nature, or where is the untouched nature? But think smart. So think in terms of that realizable and so I think, well, with many plans of the Indonesian government, they're so big that you know in the planning process already, this will not be manageable. This, although the money is there, there was money allocated for the eco-percentrum, but we know these processes go slow, and that needs a lot of cooperation and legislation. And so, well, that would be my answer to your question. Let us not think small, but let us think smart in changes that are realizable, and also inspire us to go forward. So I leave it at that as my answer to your question. And yeah, once again to the Quranic topic, I don't engage in that. That is really your expertise as Indonesian scholars to deal with that issue.
Okay, that's in Mr. Richardson. We say thank you so much for the explanation, and we are going to the end for the agenda. But before we end this seminar, the committee asks you to make one quote about this theme today. The quotes can be one phrase or one sentence. That later will be we publish in our social media. Can you, sir? Mr. Fadli, help me to write it.
Oh, I just quote the same sentence that I said when I referred to Abdul Hafid. Don't think small, but think smart. That would be my challenge, and of course, in the background is this whole debate about environmentalism or eco-modernism. I'm an optimist. I really do believe in green technologies, clean technologies. I do believe in green Islam and clean Islam. Bring them together in a way that is manageable. Smart. So my sentence would be: don't think small, think smart.
Don't think small, but think smart. Okay, thank you so much for Mr. Wijan and all of the audiences, and especially for the people who already give the question for the agenda today. And before we close our agenda, we have to take picture together. So I please you for the audiences to open up the video, so make it the nicest smile for today. Yeah, let me to 1, 2, 3 go.
But many are already quitted, Mbak. Already leave.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we professionally have more than 60, right?
Yeah, never mind. But the explanation from Mr. Wijan is already in our mind. Okay, the next slide maybe. Wait first. 1, 2, 3, go. Okay, thank you so much for joining the agenda today. That Mr. Wijan has already give the explanation and open up our view, our eyes to looking at nicely for the environment and do whatever we have to do as a Khalifah in part. So be the best for doing, be the best for thinking, and I hope our meeting today give the best impact for our environment, especially in our daily life. Maybe Miss Inaya, as the Dean of the Faculty of Islamic Law, can give the conclusion for the agenda today.
No, Mbak Afni, I think that's enough. That's more than enough. Thank you very much, Pak Frans. We really appreciate, this program, because, you really lead us to open up, like, Mbak Afni just said earlier. This is a really serious and really critical issues in Indonesia, and we have to link this issue with, theological discussion and discourses. And thank you very much, Pak Frans. Inshallah, in the next meeting, in the next agenda, in the near future, we have to sit together and then design kind of summer courses on these issues. I think it's going to be beneficial for not only for us in the academic levels, yeah, but also for our society, hopefully.
Okay,
And
thank
hopefully
you.
we can have like module, yeah, Mbak Afni. Hopefully,
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
we can develop module. And Pak Hafid, you can join us, of course, because seems like you are an expert on this and you have a concern, yes, special.
Inshallah,
on this.
inshallah.
Thank you very much for joining us, for everyone here. Mbak Dina Hermina, everyone. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Pak Franz. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
so
much for all.
much
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
all.
Bye bye.
And we close our agenda by reciting Hamdalah for the Muslim and your best praying for others. And the time I back to the Mr. Fadil Lukman as the master of ceremony. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Oh, the new
Hello.
environmentalist itu.
The new generation. Huh? The new generation.
The new generation of.
I mean, it is. Let's be honest. It is for this generation. It is for our next generation that we really have to engage in this debate.
Exactly. Thank you, Prof. Inshallah, we will find the best time to see you and Pak Rector, as Pak Rector already mentioned, yeah, to see you in person in the next. Inshallah.
Thank you very much, Pak Wisan, Bu Inaya, Mbak Afni.
Terima kasih, Mas Fadli.
Thank you very much.
Terima kasih semuanya.